Well, good evening, everyone. We are going to begin. This evening, our speaker comes from SurveyMonkey, software engineer. And can we all welcome Stephen Jimenez? Come on, look excited.
Hey everyone, how's everyone doing? Good. All right, got some energy in the crowd. So my name is Stephen Jimenez. I work for SurveyMonkey, and before I start, I just want to give a big shout out to Rance and the STEM Center for reaching out and allowing me to do this. This is something I've done before, but I really enjoy doing because I would have loved to hear from somebody from the community, within my community and within the industry when I was in college. So really appreciate the opportunity. So Latino and Tech, what I've learned. So just before we kind of dive into what I do, I just want to give a few facts about myself. So I was born in Long Island, New York. I've been out here for about 3 years. I was raised in a Colombian household, so I speak Spanish. And I enjoy giving back to the community. So I spent a lot of time just helping around at the Siena Youth Center. And some things that I like to do on the side, I like to cycle. It's something that's been brought up within the family. Photography is something new that I've been kind of playing around with. And I enjoy traveling. Some music I like listening to are hip-hop, Latin music, and reggae. And I'm a media blogger, a writer. And so my STEM story kind of starts in detention. It's not really the usual way that a STEM story starts, but it starts when in high school I kind of went to a high school and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I was good in math, but I didn't know what kind of job to get with a math degree. So in my mind, I was just kind of like, okay, I'm just gonna major in math, I'm gonna find a job, and just make money and provide. That's really all my plan was. So one day I get detention in math class because I was throwing around paper. And I'm really close with the teacher, so both a friend of mine and myself got detention, and she asked the questions, what are you gonna do? What are you doing in college? And I was like, I really don't know. I like math. I like using math, so why don't I just find a job in some kind of business and just make money? And so she threw the idea. She said, Stephen, I want you to think about actuarial science. And I'm like, okay, what is that? And so, in short, actuarial science, they kind of work for insurance companies, and they kind of punch in some numbers, and they help businesses make big decisions. And they also make a lot of money. So that attracted to me. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I'll just do this thing called actuarial science. I'll try and do it, and that's what I planned on doing. So when applying for colleges, I looked at colleges close to me in terms of New York. I didn't go out of state. I couldn't afford it. So eventually I got into Queens College, and I majored in both computer science and applied math. And the reason why I did both is because the research that I've done about being an actuarial scientist said that it's beneficial if you do both majors. So without knowing, I'm like, okay, let's do it. And so as I was taking math classes and as I was taking computer science classes, I didn't know much about computer science. I kind of just fell into it. The more classes I took, the more projects I worked on, the more I realized I liked computer science rather than math. Because math was just theories and prove this and assume you had this, and it really was boring. While computer science, they said make a calculator or create a program that does this. And so seeing what I can do in computer science and seeing it live in action actually made it more interesting. Another thing in college that I highly recommend everyone here to do is to create a study group. And I say this because I made a lot of friends who had my back and helped me out when it came to studying. And I also learned from them. So I looked for friends that knew more than me, and I tried learning from them. I had a friend named Raf. And on the side, he would make websites for small businesses. And so every now and then I'd be like, Raph, what are you up to? Like, can you teach me? What are you looking at? Send me a document. And so through him, I would work with him on some of his projects, and on the side, I was learning. And so that was Queens College. Queens College was about 5 years of university. And at the same time of being in college, I knew that I had to get an internship. And so I built this hunger to find any type of internship, no matter what it was, paid or unpaid. And that's kind of like what I did. So the first internship, I had an unpaid internship. It was this guy who was solo, kind of startup, and he was like, hey, here's my website, can you do this for me? And so it wasn't like, it was more of a learning experience than it was something where I had deadlines to meet. And so I learned a lot in that experience. And then next year, when looking for another internship, that experience I had previously helped a lot. And so eventually I had an internship at Net at Work, which is it's a digital company in New York. And then I actually ended up finding an internship in New York Life Insurance. And so I went from getting an internship that was not really paid to one that was actually recognized, working with a company that's pretty recognized. So that hunger for experience definitely helped me up, set my ability to launch into here in California. So in 2014 is the date that I graduated, the year that I graduated, and it was time to interview. So I started interviewing, and for like 2-3 months, I couldn't get anything. I would get interviews, and people would say, do you know this and that? Or they'll ask me like this big question, and I have no idea. So I failed hard for 2-3 months. My first interview was a Google interview, and I completely failed that. And so it just got a lot harder, but at the same time, I took the time to reassess what kind of questions I was being asked, and reassess who were asking these questions. And so one thing to also keep in mind when applying for jobs is sometimes the company doesn't know what they're actually looking for. And you know your own worth, and you gotta advocate for yourself. And so 2-3 months go on, and I couldn't find anything, so I decided to reassess and strategize. Took my phone out, and I said, okay, what applications do I use that I can potentially apply for? And so one application I used was TuneIn Radio, and they're basically an online radio company, and it went great. The interview went great. I got invited to get an interview here in Palo Alto, and coming to California it kind of blew my mind because I didn't see myself as an individual smart enough to be in Silicon Valley, and that's because Silicon Valley holds itself to being a place with smart people and the geniuses of tech. And I'll let everyone know a little secret: not everyone is as smart as they seem. And at the end of the day, it's all about how hungry you are to learn, how hungry you are to complete a project, and there are plenty of companies out here that are willing to take somebody new and allow them to make mistakes to then learn. And so I came to California with TuneIn, and they relocated me, and that was an experience of its own because it was my first time out of mom and dad's house and figuring out how to find a place, an apartment, and pay bills. So that was both a scary experience and a learning experience. So 5 months into TuneIn, I get laid off for whatever reason. They actually never told me why. But after that experience, I was able to get a job at SurveyMonkey. So currently, I'm a backend engineer. And in the beginning, I was a full stack engineer for about 6 months. Then I transferred to a front-end engineering position for about another 6 months. And I decided to join a back-end team, and for about 2 years now, I've been a back-end engineer. To explain a little bit about the differences is you have front-end and back-end. And so when you log on to Facebook or when you log on to Gmail and you see the buttons or the interactions that you make on that application, all of that is controlled by the front end. And you'll hear things like JavaScript, HTML, CSS. Those are just tools that are used to make something look pretty, an interaction, make it accessible. The back end is everything you don't see. The back end is basically, so if you wanted to load all your emails, Google has to go into their database and see, okay, let's see how many emails Steven has sent out, or what are the latest emails that Steven has received. So all that data is just taken from the database and passed on to the front end. So the front end makes it look pretty and have you interact with it in a way where you can read your email a lot better than just text. And that's I like this picture because it kind of depicts of what front end and back end is like. So the front end, again, is like the pretty interaction, what you see on the application, and the back end is like all the crazy spaghetti code that you don't see. And so for the past 3 years, I've learned a lot. And the switching of each positions was partly in my control and partly not in my control. So I came into SurveyMonkey with more front-end experience than back-end. And so with the full stack position, you're dealing with both front-end and both back-end. And so 5 months down the line, my manager comes to me and says, Steven, we're moving you to a team temporarily. There is another team that needs some help on the front end, and being that you have front end experience, we're going to put you on this team, but then you got to come back. So one thing that I definitely would also advise is when you're at a job in tech or in a STEM career, your skills that you have coming in can be applied to any other role. And so when I say this is because I jumped into backend because I wanted to. So I was supposed to go back to the front end position, but by speaking with other teams and speaking with other people, I saw the opportunity to jump into something that I didn't know about at all. And it was a complete learning experience. And so by speaking with other teams and my manager, I made sure it was okay, I was able to jump into a back-end role where I've learned a whole different world, basically. So one impactful project I've had while being a back-end engineer is we have this problem where we have surveys, and each survey has a logo, for example. And so we save our images in the Amazon web server, and the problem that we had is basically if I had one survey, for example, survey A, and their logo was this funny, beautiful monkey, and you copied another survey, that survey, the one that's copied, is pointing to the same image. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because if we were to delete survey A, we also manage the images, so we have to make sure the logo is deleted. So if we delete survey A, and we also delete the logo, then survey B doesn't have a logo. So when you take survey B, you see a corrupted image instead of a nice picture. And so this was a problem that had to be fixed, but not in the application itself. It had to be fixed outside of the application. And so this is one of the things where this is something that I had to learn about how to do this, because as a front end and full stack or back end engineer, everything was in the application, not outside of the application. So to better illustrate this problem, take the gray square as a computer or a server. Each little square inside is a process. So for example, let's say that my application is this blue square. The blue square processes, takes data, takes requests from the internet, does what it needs to do, but it's not going to clean up the problem that I had. So I had to work outside and create a separate process to run and clean up those images. So I had to curate just just a list of information. What survey is affected, what image does it have, and then write a script to go through each and every single data point and say, okay, this image needs to be copied over and is owned by this survey. So it took me out of my comfort zone because it was not something I was used to. It was something not within my realm. And this is something I definitely learned a lot about. And so this same idea, applies to many things, right? So what I learned from this is that you can't just focus on your role. You also have to focus on what's happening around you, what's happening around the application. When there's an application, you need to think about databases. When you look at an application, you have to think about the server or the computer that it's running on. Think about how much computing power do you have, how much traffic it's getting. And so the same idea applies in life, right? In life, you focus so much on maybe working out, or you focus a lot of your time on family or friends or food, for example. And so you have to take the time to look at what's happening around you to create that balance. And that's the same idea that what I kind of went through. When first trying to figure this problem out, I made some mistakes, and I'll mention them in a minute. But it's as a result for not thinking outside of my realm and not thinking what other effects could happen upon running whatever script I had to run. And so, memorable failures. I believe that it's very important to notice when you fail and to make sure you notice when you fail and realize what you learned from that failure. So, a month into my role at SurveyMonkey, I broke the homepage because I thought I was smart and decided to fix something that didn't need to be fixed. And so upon signing into the website, people's homepage was broken. If you were running Windows. No, if you're running, IE8 or IE9, the old browsers that hopefully no one is using. The second memorable failure is the forever running failure. So the same script that I was talking about earlier, I ran the script on the server. And so, but I didn't put anything to kind of let me know that things were running. And so I simply just ran the script, and on the computer it was a blinking dot. And so that was bad because when my manager said, okay, how's the process? How's it going? And I had no answer. I'm like, oh, it's still running. So it ran for hours without logs, and that was a big, big fail. My favorite fail number 3, happened last year. We had this big brand refresh. So like we changed the colors, we changed how the website looked, we changed how people interact with the website. And on the day that we launched this this big brand refresh, I pushed by accident, without knowing, some code that wasn't tested. And so slowly the site started failing. And I look at my phone in Slack, the message center that we communicate with, and I'm like, oh, things are failing. So I'm in my seat thinking, why is the site failing? And then I realized what I did. And luckily it only took 15 minutes to recover, but this is by far my favorite fail. If you go on my LinkedIn page, one of my skill sets is bringing production down and bringing it back up. Memorable successes. I am guilty of not recognizing my own success. I'm guilty of, I play myself too small when I should be playing myself a lot bigger than what I should be. But some things that I've been successful at is different projects, introducing projects that maybe the company wasn't ready for, or a team was new to. And so I really took advantage of whenever something new came out, saying, hey, this is new, this can improve X, Y, and Z, let's try it. And from trying to do all these things, it was successful again because I learned a lot in terms about myself. I learned about how to process certain things that I needed to create. And with that, I also was able to engage with other teammates in other teams. And so slowly, people started to kind of recognize my accomplishments and know who I was, which was pretty interesting. And so these are just some of the projects that I've worked on. They probably mean nothing on this slide, but they are just big projects that are either features or something that was very necessary. This I'm very proud of. As we all know, in tech, there's not that much diversity. Black and Latinos make 5% of the industry, and that's something that has to change. And so, growing up, I've always been around nonprofits and doing community service. I come from a Latino background, and so coming into Silicon Valley, it was a rude awakening. At CUNY, I kind of came in and was like, okay, where are all the Latinos? Like, I had imposter syndrome. I didn't know, like, hey, should I be talking a certain way? Should I be code switching all the time? How much of myself do I bring to work? And so that was something that was shocking and I didn't know how to deal with. Luckily, at TuneIn, I had an awesome manager, Don Woods, who I really connected with, African American here in the Bay Area, and we just connected on hip hop and on other types of community service and just social justice as well. And so coming into SurveyMonkey, I still had that need to just create a community because I didn't like the fact that I always questioned myself and I couldn't really connect at work with who I was. And so I started this group called Blatinos. It's an ERG, employee resource group for Black and Latinx employees. And so a lot of companies have this, not just tech companies, but there are employee resource groups where companies will provide you a budget for whatever you want to do, whether it's to host events, to host a social for your own group. And so I took advantage of this and kind of said, okay, I'm going to start this. And at the time, it was the only ERG group, which then later people caught on. And so LGBTQIA++ started, Wing Group started. And so it helped push this awareness that we need more representation in, not only in SurveyMonkey, but in the tech, that we need to be aware of this. And so we've hosted a bunch of workshops, we've had panels. This past month we had, for Black History Month, we had Black Power mixtape showing. If y'all are not familiar with it, I highly suggest it. It's basically a film that was done by some foreigners from Sweden, and they have footage about Angela Davis, Stokely Carmichael, and about the Black Panther Party. And so it was very educational, it was very inspiring. And every year we also volunteer with SMASH, which is a summer program for kids who are in high school, and they are found in Stanford, and they're hosted by Level Playing Field Institute, and they're located in Oakland. And so we've done a lot. We've done a lot of stuff here at SurveyMonkey. Because of this, I've been able to have conversations with execs, CEOs, and kind of challenge the idea of what it means to be a diverse company, an inclusive company. And it's important I felt it was important to voice my opinion because my experiences are unique and not all CEOs here in the Valley understand what it is to be Black or what it is to be Latinx. And so this is something I'm really passionate about, and if you are too, I highly suggest just push for this wherever you go. So some personal advice is reaching your goals requires collaboration, which means that if you want to get to a certain level or you want to find the job that you dream of, you can't do it alone. Success is not something you do by yourself. You look for mentors, you look for people who have the same goals and same dreams, but it requires collaboration. If somebody tells you, I did this all by myself, they're lying. Imposter syndrome. It's something that will come up, and a lot of times it comes up in the underrepresented community because we're in a situation where we're like, okay, I have this job, and am I really qualified for this job? We begin to ask ourselves questions like, is this job right for me? And it happens to everyone. It's not just for underrepresented folks that experience it, but I think everyone. It's a human thing to question yourself, to question your quality and value in a position at work. And so it's inevitable, and some things that I've used to cope with it is I've meditated, I've exercised, definitely. Speaking to other people about it is definitely helpful. And third point, invest in yourself. No one is going to give you the job that you want. No one is going to push you to become a better professional in the workplace. And that's just, for me, that's the cold truth. You have to invest yourself, which means that, if you're in college, that means looking for internships outside of the internship office. Or if that's at the workplace, it's taking some time out of your day to learn something new outside of your job role. And again, collaboration, reaching out to people who can help you and give you the resources to invest in yourself. And with that, you can reach wherever you want to go. So I like to give out my information. Hopefully you are contacting speakers that are coming here. Again, it goes back to collaboration. It ties really closely to networking. And just definitely take the opportunity to send an email. If maybe I can answer your question, maybe I can't, but maybe if I know someone who can help out and help you out. Every now and then I kind of blog. I've blogged about being Latino in the workplace. I've blogged about the current political climate that's ridiculous. I've blogged about what it's like kind of jumping that socioeconomic status, going from, I came from, I was good, I had a supportive family, I was in a great community, but going into tech took me on another level where it was just different, where my family looked at me as kind of this rich person with money, and coming here in the Bay Area, I did not feel that at all. So feel free to reach out. I'm open for questions. Yeah. Also, if you have more questions about being a full stack engineer and backend and front end, I can go in depth. Just send me an email. I have no problem. Yeah, you have questions.
I'm not familiar with the term Latinx.
So Latinx is a gender-neutral term. So, for example, if I was transgender, right, and people see me as a Latino and I don't identify as a Latino, then Latinx is used to kind of be more inclusive. Question?
What was the first language you learned?
My first language, like programming language?
Yeah.
First programming language was C++. So going into college, they taught me C++ as the first class I took. Unfortunately, college doesn't prepare you for the industry, which is why I always say invest in yourself. Sometimes what they teach you in college is not up to par with what the industry has, and a lot of times during those interviews, a lot of what I did outside of college helped. So the first one was C++, and through friends I started learning like HTML, CSS, and kind of like the web-related items. Any other questions? So the most common programming language I see in terms of like looking for work. So it's hard to say because each language has its own use case. Right? So for example, you have Python, which is used a lot in natural language processing. There's also, depending if you're more data science, you'll use Python. A lot of startups use Ruby on Rails. So it all depends on what you're doing. So if you're going more of a web route, then the advice would be to really focus on JavaScript and CSS and HTML. If you're going more the general software engineering route, a great programming language to pick up is Python, Ruby. So I think that's what I would say.
What languages you guys commonly use at SurveyMonkey?
I'm sorry?
What languages do you guys use at SurveyMonkey?
So at SurveyMonkey, we are mainly a Python shop. So we use Python, but there are other things that are used. Obviously, for web-facing applications, we use React, we use CSS and HTML, which is kind of the general borderline what you have to use. But it's mostly Python, and there's other teams that use different languages.
Can you describe the data like in your
So describe a kind of like just a regular day. Okay, so I go into the office, and the first thing I want to do is kind of check my emails. I want to see if there's anything that's really urgent. But every time I walk into the office, I kind of, in my mind, I know I have like a priority list already in my mind. So a lot of times when you have a project, I know maybe this project is at this stage, and I want to dedicate this time to finish it. So a lot of times I'll go in. Sometimes I'll have breakfast. So they do serve. We do have a cafeteria at SurveyMonkey, but I go in first thing in the morning. I check my emails. I see what progress is going on with the current project across teams as well. And then on Tuesdays, for example, I have stand-up. So I meet with my team and say, hey, this is what I'm focusing on, or hey, this problem came up. Can you look into that? So a lot of times, we do have certain meetings where we communicate and say, hey, check into this. But most of the time, I'm in my role as a contributor, because I'm not like a manager or anything, I don't have as many meetings compared to other people. So a lot of times, it's less collaboration. There's collaboration online, but it's more into what I'm doing, my projects. A manager, for example, will have a ton more meetings. In the case where there's a new project coming about, then I'll have a meeting. So I'll be invited to a meeting, we'll sit down, we'll come together and say, okay, we want to implement this, we want this new feature. And they'll ask me what is required. And so I'll say, okay, in order for this to happen, you need A, B, and C. So there are times for collaboration, person to person, and virtual, but then there's times where I'm literally just me and the computer.
During your time at the company, what's the most important thing you learned?
Most important thing? The most important thing I've learned is to breathe. And to be honest, like there's stress, and then there's no stress. And at the end of the day, you put that stress on yourself. And I've put a lot of stress on myself in certain projects. And now I've gotten a lot better to handle that in a sense where I think something is a red flag. And so I gotta take a step back and say, just breathe, right? Like what's the worst that could happen? And I think it comes from that imposter syndrome and the want to not look bad and not look dumb as well. And so a lot of times we just gotta breathe. And at the end of the day, it's not the end of the world.
So what's the interview process like?
What's the what?
So what's the interview process like for SurveyMonkey?
So at SurveyMonkey, the interview process is first phone call is usually with a recruiter, so they'll talk to you about like, you'll discuss like what you know, what kind of role you're looking for, because their goal is, I have a candidate, and where do they best fit? Because they have a slot of places where they can put you. So the first is the interview process, well, the conversation with the recruiter. And the recruiter will tell you, this is how our process is. And so it's your goal to ask as many questions beforehand. The second most common step, which you'll see across all tech companies, is the tech kind of test, right? So it's an online test where they make sure that you know how to code and you know what you're doing. If you pass that, then usually it's an on-site interview. So the on-site interview, you'll have maybe 4 to 5 different people interviewing you. So when I interviewed, I had somebody from front end interview me. They gave me like a whiteboard question. Another person from the back end or a more back end role gave me a back end like question. And so it all depends on what role you're applying for. So if you're applying for more of a front end role, expect kind of JavaScript questions, CSS problems, and then you'll also get very abstract questions. So, for example, I've gotten a question, not at SurveyMonkey, but somewhere else. I've gotten a question, which was a bad question. They're like, so if you were to create an app that tells you when the next bus comes, how would you build it? And so it's just such an abstract question. It's like, well, there's a lot that goes into that. And so it's your job or your goal as an interviewee to ask as many questions to understand the problems. So the interview process depends on what role you're really applying for. Any other questions? So for a beginner, I would say first learn how to code. And you don't want to kind of pigeonhole yourself into a specific kind of section, because as long as you can code, then you could learn front end, you could learn back end, you could learn scripting, because coding is like speaking a language where you have different language, you have Spanish, French, English, they all do the same, they all communicate, they just do it in different ways. The same thing as programming. You have Python, JavaScript, Ruby. As long as you know how to code, you can learn any language. And so once you learn how to code, then you can look into classes on front end or back end and start to see, okay, I kind of like this, I kind of don't like this. So for example, I don't really enjoy front end because I don't like to have to deal with, oh, I want this button to be blue instead of red, or I want this to appear this way. And so it's not a hit on anyone who really likes front end, it's just my personal preference. But yeah, just start with coding.
So after you finish your degree, do you feel fully prepared to enter the workforce in terms of like skill set with like programming and stuff, or do you like attend like after the software boot camp or something like that?
I did not feel prepared at all, and that's not to kind of give any negative vibes to Queens College, but that's the way I prepared was through internships. So like Queens College provided me the education that I needed to just know the basics of coding. The internships, the experience, and looking at other things outside and like really being hungry for opportunities is what helped me get to a level where I was comfortable like coding in front of an interviewer, right? And so, no, I didn't feel prepared at all. And during those 2 to 3 months, I was stressing because like every now and then I would either not make it through an interview process or made it like to the final round and it was between me and some other person, and the next thing you know, like, oh, we're sorry to let you know that you didn't get the position. And so like for 2 or 3 months, I was stressing, which is why I then strategized apply for a company that I knew their product, and that kind of helps. And so as long as you get past that first internship or that interview process, I mean, I don't want to say the world is your oyster, but like at a company, you can make mistakes. They hired you. And so you just take advantage of all that. It's just getting through the interview process. So I didn't go through boot camp. I haven't tried. I've thought about going back to doing like similar boot camp, not for beginners, but like just to kind of enhance my skills. But it's, yeah, college for me it didn't prepare me. So I had to look outside to really see what the industry was doing and what they required.
What are some of your favorite perks of being a software engineer?
Favorite perks about being a software engineer, I could work from home. That's pretty awesome. Working from home, depending on how big the company is, you get free food. That's very popular here in Silicon Valley. Working from home and also being able to work remotely. So, for example, there's been cases where I needed to go to the doctor and I'll work from a coffee shop while I wait for my appointment, or I'll work in the actual waiting room. So remotely is a big plus. As a software engineer here in the Valley, you have a lot of freedom. There's a lot of flexibility, assuming you're at the right company. So there's a lot of freedom, there's a lot of leeway to learn other things and to just jump around through different positions. And it's not as a strict environment like if I was on, I don't know, Wall Street. I don't know what Wall Street's like, but I can only assume.
So do you feel like you learn more at your job than you did at school, or do you feel like you
Yeah, for sure. I learned more at the job than I think I would, because at work you get constant projects and you get constant learning opportunities. And if you take advantage of jumping through roles, you're putting yourself in positions to learn. And so you're facing real world problems with the product that you're working with. And so it's on a larger scale than you would kind of at school or on your own. You know, SurveyMonkey gets a lot of traffic. And so being a backend engineer in this one team that was responsible for all the survey data, if our application was down for like 10 minutes, that means that no one is able to create a survey, edit their survey, take a survey, and so that's money going down the drain. So you're put into a situation where you're working at such a larger scale than you'll ever would personally. Thank you for that question. The question was, why do you think the numbers are so low for Black and Latino employees in tech? You know, you'll hear like, oh, it's a pipeline issue, or there's not enough, like, you can't find them, right? I'm sorry? And so, like, I think what the problem is, I think it's a combination of many things, right? It's a combination of where recruiting is looking for these applicants, how they're looking at them, internal bias that we all have, right? At the end of the day, we all have some sort of bias. And also, I think it's the education system is also failing us. You have school districts that, I mean, I don't know about the school districts here, but I've heard school districts, they teach kids programming at a young age. I don't know how the same district or another district is doing the same, let's say in Oakland or Fresno, or another community. Like, are they learning coding? Who knows? And so I think education, it's a bias. Recruiting is looking at the wrong places, and I think it's the failure to also hire Black and Latinx executives. Because once you start putting people in positions of power, it's gonna people reporting under you is going to reflect. Versus if we continue putting people, and I mean, it's important to keep a very diverse, representative workplace, but it's not happening now. And I think there are people that are actually making the effort to change and realize what they're doing. But I think it's that, because we're out here. I mean, I got, you know, if you're ever in, if you are looking into programming, there are communities out there, and they just every now and then, like, we're looking to hire for this, and we're out here. It's just people are not looking. That's what I think. Any other questions? Could be about anything.
Thank you, Stephen, for coming out and speaking to our crowd, and thank you for the questions, because we finished like, you know, half an hour early and you guys asked 20 minutes of questions. That's good. That's good. So we thank you. We also have a consolation prize for you for coming out and speak. so just for him, not you guys. But we do have some hamburgers left over if y'all want them. So go ahead and take that. Oh, and there's the little vegetarian sticks too. Take those too.
Exactly. It's just like and then it was 5:30 and I was like, I gotta go. Unless I want to go alone. Sorry. I get it. Yeah.